All right, this is learning how to learn. This is when you find the Brony fandom makes really cool things and you're really interested in how do you actually go about learning those things. Because you'll see amazing things on YouTube or you'll see amazing fanfics and you only see the end product, but you don't really know how they got there. And there's a kind of a process to it. And Bronies, they make a lot of content. We have 1.6 billion words of My Little Pony fan fiction. There's just a lot. Staggering amounts of fan art and lots of analysis videos. And there's even a subsection of YouTube for audio fanfic readings. You have a lot of different people that read fan fiction out loud and do a lot of audio recording stuff. And that's not even saying like PMVs, where you have the simple PMVs you see in Equestria Daily. There's clips of the show, and then you have the more detailed motion graphics art, where people are moving things around and Bronies are doing interesting things. So that's also there. And that's not to mention animation, probably the hardest one of all, that really does require a big group of people to kind of work together for it. So our big question, how did they learn how to do that? Because there's just so much content, and how did they figure that out? So this panel is for people that you're non-creatives or like maybe mildly creative, that you're interested in seeing kind of a glimpse of what other people have done and how they learn that process of how to do that. And it's also to help you figure out what you don't know, because until you figure out what you don't know, you can't even stop and Google it. So it's important. And then just also for people that are just curious about how some of this stuff is created. So the biggest question is, how do I learn how to do that? So other people learn how to make it, and they're humans. I'm also human, so I can also figure out how to do something, because everything is learnable. So let's kind of go through the agenda of the panel. We're going to be going through emotional barriers to learning new skills, because there's always angst when trying to draw for the first time. It looks terrible, and other skills too. Then there's also writing, particularly fan fiction, though you'd be surprised the amount of writing that happens in the Brony fandom, even just comments on YouTube videos and being able to praise other people for the content they create. So that's also something we're going over, as well as drawing, and a subsection of drawing you may not have heard of called vectoring, which is another part of this fandom, as well as audio recording fanfic readings, as well as video production and kind of what goes in with that, and maybe a little bit of animation. I don't personally have experience with animation, at least doing a full animation project. I've watched lots of tutorials enough to be like, wow, that's a lot of work. But I can at least point you in the right direction, and that's mostly what this panel is just pointing you in the right direction for how to learn things if you'd like to. And tell me if I talk too fast. I always listen to stuff on double speed on YouTube, and so it affects my speech. So yeah, I can slow down if you want. Thing to keep in mind, a lot of you are probably used to going to school. We're gonna learn this is the War of 1812, this is what happened in the War of 1812. And I don't know why I picked that example, because I cannot think of what happened in the War of 1812 besides it was a fight against the British. So school mostly focuses on book knowledge, but what we're going to be delving into are skills, and skills are a little bit different. I think the biggest difference you can see probably if you ever took a wood shop where you had to actually learn carpentry and focus and like hammer things together. That is a skill, it is carpentry. But so you need to kind of separate those two different categories, because learning knowledge, you can learn it from a book, it's relatively simple, but learning a skill is something you do have to get hands-on and create things. Okay, and then I do have a caveat here. People are different. Like there's a big giant it depends over all of humanity, because some people may be better suited at certain things, some people may be better suited for other things, but and also this panel focuses a lot on watching and following along with YouTube tutorials. Perhaps that's not the best way for you to learn, which I don't know. That's what I'm going to be showing, because that's what helped me learn, and being able to follow someone else do something is a pretty good way to learn things. So overcoming emotional barriers. I had like the weirdest worldview in high school. I had this thing where people are born like knowing how to draw. Like I'd see people that know how to draw, and I'm just like, wow, they're so good at drawing. Like they're good at what they do, and like I had no idea that that is because they worked hard, they practiced, and they did it. So among the emotional barriers to go over is that realizing that everything can be learned. Everything you see around you, it was either like designed, created by people. Like you'll see like just this room. an architect designed it, and then you had groups of people working together to actually build the materials and this whole global supply chain to it. And you can learn all that if you really want to, but it's really cool that all this is learnable. I don't know, I'm a big fan of learning random stuff. Let's see, and realizing it's never too late to learn a skill. You can learn how to play the piano at 70 if you want to. It's perfectly fine. Or you can learn how to draw something. It's just, there's some talent you get, but that talent increases far more through hard work. So I think some of you may have heard of this book, Outliers. This is a really good book. It's all about the 10,000 hour rule, that it takes 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to reach world-class performance, which this is said a lot. People talk about like Jan Animations, and he does, I'm pretty sure he's put in his 10,000 hours of just professional, amazing, fantastic work, and it shows. However, for the purposes of this panel, we're not going to go into 10,000 hours of stuff because we just want to have fun. Like, I just want to learn enough about writing to write my first fanfic and maybe see it be fun. Or I want to draw a little bit to just draw my OC. And so for that, how long does that take? Based off of this book, I would say about 20 hours. This is one of my favorite books, is The First 20 Hours How to Learn Anything Fast by Josh Kaufman. Basically, it takes 20 hours of deliberate practice, like plan it out, like I'm gonna learn this at this time and do this at this time, and it takes about that long to learn a new skill. And that's enough just to have fun with it. You're not gonna be a world-class master at it, but just enough to have fun with it and get your feet wet and understand the process and maybe see like, do I like this? Maybe not, but it's all about overcoming that barrier at the beginning of this is way too hard. Another emotional barrier is knowing what you want to do. So if you have a goal in mind, like if you want to write a fanfic, a drawing, if you want to make an animated GIF, like actually those are really simple to make. If you ever Google Gyazo GIF, it allows you to make GIFs really easily. It's great. I'll have a link in these presentation show notes. Let's see. So basically, the more you understand what you want to make, the better chance you have to succeed. And my big problem with this was I saw all the bronies making content, making these animations videos and all this other stuff, and I was like, what do I want to do? Everything. Let's rephrase that question of, instead of what do you want to do, what do you want to do first? Because if you can answer that question, you can do a lot more things with your time rather than being trapped in the day state of like, what do I want to do first? Or like, what do I want to do? And just, but if you can kind of set what you want to do first, it can be really helpful. And then this is one of my favorite sayings for this kind of stuff is a problem well stated is a problem half solved. So if you can figure out, here is my problem. I don't know how to do this. I don't know the process for this. If you can expand that out, like let's say if you're having a problem with, when you know the vocabulary for motion graphics, you can be like, okay, how do I make a clipping mask in Adobe After Effects to achieve this effect? Like the more you can narrow down your problem, and it can be really helpful. Let's see, another emotional barrier is not giving up immediately. The CMC are a really funny example of this because they try something once and they're like, well, not for me. The cutie mark, like algorithm analysis thing didn't work, or I'm not sure what to call it, but they didn't get a cutie marks, so obviously this isn't for me. But that isn't really how it works in the real world. It does take effort because no one is good at it immediately, and so I would say to really understand if this is your thing or not your thing, give it at least 20 hours of consistent, deliberate practice before just shoving it away. And I know, like, drawing at first feels painful because it's just like, oh, this does not look good at all. But it's okay. Just give yourself some time. Learn to forgive yourself enough to at least overcome that frustration barrier. And remember, if it was too easy, it wouldn't be fun. Which, yeah, so it's important to do stuff. Another aspect of this is breaking down the skill. So you have like these big, giant skills like animation. That is actually made up of a ton of individual component skills. So earlier in the day we had M.A. Larson talk about the writing aspect of animation, and that's its own like writing skill. And then you have the actual drawing skills that people have taken into account of sitting down, like learning how to draw and doing that a bunch of different ways. And so being able to break down these skills into their component parts you can put them into bite-sized portions you can actually use to learn things. Let's see. So other things I have a problem with, I have a problem figuring out time management. Like that is just the bane of my existence. So if you want to read a big business book about it, getting things done, I recommend it. If you can handle business books, it could be really boring. I don't know, it depends. Basically, just write things down, and the more you write it down, it gives your brain permission to let it go and flip to it later and realize, yes, I wanted to learn this thing. And as you write things down, you'll notice, oh, this is coming up more often. Perhaps I should do this thing because my brain is constantly reminding me to do this task. So, yeah. And other things I found useful, just putting my phone in airplane mode and like turning off the Wi-Fi. If I'm trying to write, like turn off all the distractions, let's do this, let's get into deep work and work on something. That's not gonna work at first for some of this because you're gonna be watching a YouTube tutorial while doing something else, so. But yeah, and like remember to set apart time per day. Another really good book that I like, this is one of my favorites, it's The War of Art. It is a punch in the face. It is really, really painful because it kind of outlines this enemy towards creativity called the resistance and how hard it is to get things done. Because anytime you're trying to do a creative endeavor, everything is going to go against you, whether it to even learn it or to even do it in the first place, or some drama will happen, or you'll have 6 finals. Okay, do the finals first, but yeah, it can be a problem. So I highly recommend this book if you want a punch in the face, but in book form, to tell you to do art. So, very good. Another aspect that I've had a problem with was focusing too much on the tool. So, like let's take the carpentry example. No one stops and I'm gonna learn how to use a hammer and that's it. Like no, their goal is I want to make a birdhouse. And the tool happens to be a hammer. And I'm going to use a hammer and nail to create this birdhouse. That is also how we should treat the things we're learning. So if you're learning drawing, like say you're learning drawing, you don't really learn Photoshop, though that may be an aspect of it that could improve your drawing because it is just a tool you use. So like you want to learn novel writing, not specifically the program Scrivener. While it is a good program that helps you write novels, it is just a tool in your toolbox. So kind of separating the skill itself from the tool can be helpful, and something that I needed to keep in mind as I was trying out lots and lots of different software. Because I don't know, for some reason I started learning Adobe Illustrator without realizing I had to learn how to draw to do this. And it was a very funny experience to realize that. And so I kind of learned all these tools in different orders, but I don't know, it's pretty fun. Okay, so let's go to our first thing we're learning about is writing. I have a soft spot for this because one of the first things I made for the Brony fandom was a fanfic, and it was really exhilarating from start to finish, and also really angsty and like all sorts of stuff, but like it's fun. I recommend it. So what are the barriers to entry for fan fiction? Luckily the cost is free. You have a pencil and paper. You can write fanfic, you can write things. And this is one of my favorite comics. I'm not sure if y'all have seen it before, but just like, it's Derpy lying on the ground and Pinky goes up. She's like, pony, pony, pony. Yes, but why do we pony? And just, I think that's beautiful because that is so much of writing fan fiction. The frustration barrier for that is just like, what am I doing? I'm writing stories about horses having fun. And yeah, it's strange. The frustration barrier is very high, and also kind of like, what am I doing? But it's a lot of fun when you give it a chance. And yeah, I would recommend this for you if you get story ideas you can't stop thinking about. Like my first story I wrote, I didn't intend to write it, but then it was in the middle of the night and I could not go to sleep. And so I was like, okay, I'll just write down the idea and that'll help me go to sleep. And I just kept writing, and yeah. And then by the end of it, I had a fanfic. So it's kind of fun how that works out. This is arguably the easiest to start because putting words on pages, that's something you've been kind of taught at school to, please, we want you to write this essay, and this is already using that same skill you're getting at school, but in a different way and a much funner way, because usually for school, like cite your sources, do all this other stuff, but writing is very freeform. One of the most freeform things you can do. It's just painting words. I don't know how to describe it, but it's really fun. So let's break down writing into its constituent parts. So we have two hugely different skills that everyone kind of lumps together, but keep in mind these are two different skills. Okay, one is writing. That actually is the process of getting words onto a paper. Like putting one word in front of the other. I am writing this right now. Yeah. And then there's also editing, which is its own skill of taking those words and refining them. Like you had this long paragraph description of something, but you could shorten it down to one sentence. Or, oh, look, you didn't really understand the grammar principle here. Or you forgot to spell check this word and learn about your there, and there's, which that's kind of like the law of it. So it's kind of the lawyer approach to writing is editing and trying to get it to fit these things. And that is important. No one is going to read your stuff if it's not properly edited and doesn't look right. So those are two skills that are pretty important. Yes, and I highly recommend don't publish your first fanfic without at least letting an editor see it, because they're going to know rules that you're not going to notice, and it just helps to have a second pair of eyes. So arguably writing can be difficult because it's really useful if you have a friend with it too. Having a friend/editor look at it. Let's see. And also writing is pretty cool because it shows up everywhere. Like you'll start writing, but then it also has aspects to animation because you write the script. There's animations for pony analysis videos. Like even Dr. Wolf, the hardest part about his job is writing the script for the review, and that's what most people care about. They don't realize that's what they care about the most, but it's the additional pictures and everything else is more of an afterthought to make it more effective. So yeah, let's see. So I have plenty of weird advice about writing fanfic because this is just stuff that I found useful. Writing is so free-form that everyone has their own sets of advice, and you really just have to try a little bit, try one pattern and then just kind of go with it. So my strange advice is when you're first writing things, just write. Just put your fingers in the page and just like go forward. Don't look at how it's done or style guides until after you've written something and you've gotten the words on the paper. And then say to yourself, I'm writing right now, I'm not editing, and I will be editing later. And just tell yourself that. And so it gives you free form to just write and find yourself and picture yourself in the story, how the story is going out, what does the character say in this situation, and with what they've gotten to. And then at the beginning, write as if you and you alone will read it. And the most important thing to do, have fun. This is a hobby. You're not getting paid for this, especially not for fan fiction. So write for fun. And then also realize this may help you because there's a lot of different kinds of writers and different perspectives on it. So there's people, it's what's called pantsers. It's writing by the seat of their pants because they have no idea what's going to happen next. It is like, I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm just going to keep writing and find out as they go along. And the author is just as surprised when the characters do something as the characters are and the audience as well. And then you have planners, people that they know every aspect of the story. Like I know Viking ZX on FimFiction, he wrote about how, I had my characters visiting the Griffin Kingdom, but I hadn't figured out a Griffin monetary system that they use when they're going to buy something. So we stopped and researched monetary systems of the world for 4 hours, and then he figured out this perfect system that the Griffins would use in the Griffin lands for the monetary system, and then he finally wrote the scene for how things should work. So they're planners and world builders. So which sometimes that works for people, sometimes it doesn't. You just gotta kind of figure out what you feel most comfortable with. And then there's what's called flashlighters. This is me. They're in a dark room, they're shining a flashlight, I think the story goes over here, but they're looking at the plot and trying to see it. And they know what's going to happen in the next 3 chapters, and they may have an ending they want to happen, but they're not really sure, and the characters may go off and do something that they didn't expect. So yeah, so those are 3 types of writers you may turn into, this is pretty subjective, but these are good to know about. So writing resources, number 1, FimFiction.net. This is the place. If you don't know about it yet, this is where fan fiction gets published and read about, and where you'll probably put stuff if you are writing My Little Pony fan fiction. There's also a great website called writeoff.me. These people are harsh. If you want people to read your writing and give you harsh feedback or sometimes good feedback, I don't know, it's just full of critics. So you go to writeoff.me and they have these contests every month, and there's these anonymous writing competitions where people write a story based off a prompt. It can either be 2,000 to 8,000 words, or sometimes they have mini thick competitions that are 800 words. And those are really fun, and you'll get lots of anonymous people putting up fanfic, and then people will rate them and write critiques about it. and then by the end, like it's revealed like, oh, this person wrote this, and it's a lot of fun. It can be really ego depleting, especially when you don't do as well, and people give like harsh feedback for something that you thought was amazing, and it's a process. Also, this is not My Little Pony related. WritingExcuses.com is a really great podcast if you want to just get used to writing and have writing on your mind. They are 15-minute writing episodes from New York Times bestselling authors like Brandon Sanderson and other people, and talking about how to write. So I recommend that as well. And then I will probably mention this link several more times in these slides. Equestria Daily has a tutorial index where you can look at all these tutorials about all sorts of stuff, and they have a writing section in there as well. So things that can help. Let's see, more strange advice. There's a website called Written Kitten. I love this site. You type words into a little box, and every 100 words, a kitten pops up. It just gives you a new picture of a kitten. It's great and very silly. Maybe it won't work for you. I liked it. It's silly. There's also, if you like countdown timers, those are actually really, like, they get me to do things. I'm just like setting a counter for 30 minutes. I have 30 minutes to write. Let's go! And like, it's pretty helpful. So just a countdown timer. I've also used a creativity Twitter account where I've gone and I wrote 20 words today, or hopefully not that low, but I wrote 1,000 words today, and just kind of reporting my status. I don't have very many followers, I don't bother that many people, but it's just a way for me to publicly like, hey, I did something today, and that can be helpful to you. My last piece of weird advice about writing is keep a journal. I found this really helpful because one, you're writing from your own experience, and then you're just writing it like, I don't know, it depends on how you write your journal, whether typed or handwritten. I handwrite it. And then it allows you to better learn how to explain and articulate yourself using words. And then since it's a private journal, you don't have to worry about editing or worry about all the other stuff. Just words on the page, doesn't really matter. And it's pretty simple, and it just gets you to write every day, which will keep you able to keep up the writing habit. Okay, so that was the writing section. And now we're going to go into a much different animal, editing. So, yes, you do have to edit. So once you're done with your story, or if it's beyond a certain number of words, like 5,000, that's a lot. So you want to learn how to start self-editing, which can be its own process. It's because English is just this ridiculous language with lots of rules that don't make any sense, and then like there to there and there, and it's just, oh gosh. But it is something you're gonna have to learn if you want to write. And remember this, I'm just going over this section, but we'll be going over other skills later. So just letting you know what you're getting yourself into if you do decide to write. So let's see, editing resources. I think the main resource you want is EZN. She or he did a 20K word long writing guide on FinFiction. And it's literally like right there under resources and questions that you can go into. And that tutorial will probably get you 80% of the way there. Just follow the tutorial and look, are you making these writing mistakes? You're gonna have to go through your story and like edit it. And that's not like, you're not adding to the story like more plot elements, though you could. Man, writing is so subjective, but this is the part where you're gonna make it more concise and make it better and make sure it follows all the rules. And then for the next 15%, because you get 80% of the way there with that writing guide and knowing all the rules, I think another 15% would be getting help. And this is when you maybe call a friend. So I like using collaborative tools like Google Docs. So what you can do in Google Docs, you can go highlight a phrase or word and click comment, and then you can have like these entire like dialogue trees with your friend or editor, and being like, oh, should I do it this way? Or oh, I just realized having a leather pouch in Equestria doesn't really work that well. And then just stuff like that. So using collaborative tools. So Google Docs is probably the standard for this for fanfic authors. If you want to pay money, there's Microsoft Word, who has its own editing system, as well as Dropbox, which is free, and you can share Dropbox links. Okay, so that is like 95% of the way there. Your story has gotten there once looking at that writing guide, make sure it's following these patterns, as well as getting help from a friend. The next part is just really knowing when to quit. I don't know, I had a weird experience where I spent like this, I wrote my first novel, it was like 50,000 words, it was amazing, And then I sat on it for like a year and a half, and then I finally just published it because it just took me so long to get it out there. But at some point, remember that you do have to actually publish the words you write. You don't have to, but it's recommended. That's where all the fun part happens. You get comments of people that like it and people that hate it. But like it's fun. And so just understand that writing is a cycle of writing and editing, and writing something new and editing that, and writing this and editing that. So it's a process. So that is writing, editing portion, so you understand that. And next I'm going to go into a different topic, and to introduce that topic I'm just going to explain my strategy for watching YouTube videos. I know that sounds strange, but when you watch a lot of video tutorials, this helps. There is this really, really useful Chrome extension called Video Speed Controller you can use to increase the speed of YouTube, because right now YouTube you can only go to double speed. But with this, you can go beyond double speed and go to ×4 speed, and after that, you don't really hear audio. But using this, you can skim over a video and see, like, do I want to watch this? Like, if I watch this tutorial on how to do this dust effect in After Effects, will it actually teach me what I want to know? And you can skim watch it, see if it covers what you wanted to know, and then, oh, it doesn't, or oh, it does. And then you can go back, watch it single speed, and actually follow along. And by follow along, I mean when the person on the screen does something, you mimic that person. This is useful if you have multiple monitors and have one screen is just the tutorial, and the other screen you're actually working at it and typing and moving the mouse. But yeah, so those are my ways to do things. You just watch it quickly, just to get a brief overview, and then watch it again but slower as you follow along and learn. So, okay. So next is drawing, which, oh man, this is a lot of fun. Oh, it's so weird, but I don't know. Like, these are some of my first sketches, like Google image searching ponies. I really wanted to draw my OC, which is a Pegasus. And so, like, let's see if I can draw that, and like just trying to carefully match what I saw on the screen. So this is pretty free if you're doing the pencil and paper variety. Yeah, I recommend trying to learn this if you really want to draw your own OC and work on that. So, so your initial tools will be pencil and paper. Maybe later on, beyond the scope of this panel, like consider buying a tablet and drawing software like Photoshop or Paint Tool SAI or Manga Studio. But for now, just focus on just sketching and that kind of stuff. So like the initial hurdles for drawing is it's genuinely difficult to get yourself to do things you aren't good at, especially with drawing, because you, like with writing, you may be able to fool yourself, and you don't know what you wrote is bad until like much later on. But here you can immediately see, like, this doesn't look quite right. Like, some of the proportions on that are way off. I'm not sure what's going on. So the frustration barrier is really high. So if you can spend the first 20 hours of just deliberately practicing it, you can kind of overcome that frustration barrier. The thing that helped me were these online tutorials where someone would describe how to draw something. Like, I think this is the most famous one, just how to draw My Little Pony. It has lots of views, and kind of the key things to learn from there when you're first drawing is using guidelines and circles. So what they do, you're going to see on these videos a lot, someone's going to go up there and they're going to show a picture of an actual pony, and it'll look great, and they're going to start like drawing circles and saying like, this is how it all comes together, and you do not see how it all comes together, and it's really weird. But they're all into these circles for some reason. They know what they're doing. You don't know what they're doing, but you'll kind of learn as you go along how to use these circles to guide how you're going to learn things. And they're using guidelines to figure out, like, oh, this is about where the eye should go, and it doesn't really make sense at first, but kind of just practice along with them, and it'll become more clearer as you draw to kind of draw what they're drawing, and then you'll see, like, oh, that is actually how that helps them draw things. Another thing to keep in mind is drawing from reference. This is important. I know some painters, they have to go out, get a photographer, take a picture of what they want to do in the right pose or whatever pose they're doing, and then they literally just draw that. Like, you also need to understand that it's perfectly okay to look at a picture of what you're drawing as you're drawing it. Because most of our experience looking at other people drawing is, oh, they're just doodling on the side, and they're not using reference. But when you draw, go ahead and Google what you want to draw in like the pose you'd like to, and try to figure it out. One of the books that's helped me with this was Steal Like an Artist. This is really short. Maybe get it at the library because you'll read it in like an hour.
There's also a TED Talk.
Yes. YouTube it at double speed. No. So yeah. it's pretty good. So, because in your initial stages, you just want to like learn how to emulate the styles of others. Even later stages, still keep learning. So here's an example of something I did, because I really liked this Spike the Butler. Like, I love that art. It was just really well done. So I tried to emulate on the right, like how would it look if he was flying, and it doesn't look that right, but I'm getting there, I'm practicing, it's fun. So kind of go back and forth between watching tutorials and specific poses, as well as Googling, like how would you draw this in this pose? The key thing is just to deliberately practice what you want to do and tweak other people's drawings, kind of like steal their style, but then kind of make it your own. There's a little bit of derivation involved, because no creative work is done in isolation. There's a really good YouTube series called Everything's a Remix, and it's true because everyone is influenced by other people, and so feel free to let yourself be influenced. So that's my recommendation for breaking down drawing. Find a good tutorial, watch it, Google other things you want to figure out, and just kind of practice drawing for a while until you, well, either continue and keep going or give up or whatever makes you feel comfortable. Another aspect of drawing, I never really did get the hang of this, but after you draw something with pencil and paper, you can with a pen go over it with better lines and then erase the pencil drawings later, and you have this more pristine artwork. So I don't know too much about this, but this is something recommended for a Google session. Or you can learn how to digitally ink using software. So and I'm going to go into that a little bit now, is vectoring. This is how you get the show style, because the show is using like all these like mathematical methods of creating these characters. It's really funky the first time you do it. So it's the process of using these mathematical curved lines in order to create drawings. And so that's what the show uses. So let me give you a brief demonstration of how that works now. Let's see. So let me give you a brief example of what a vectoring program would do. So this is Adobe Illustrator. So what you see right here, this is a sketch I made, a little derpy since I'm not the best artist, but I do enough art to have fun with it. So what I can do, I can scroll in real close and I'm seeing all these pixels. And so what a vector program does is kind of recreating it mathematically. So you can always have pixel perfection no matter how much you zoom in or out. So let me give you an example of that. So I'm going to create a new layer right here, and I can click a point right here and drag it off over here, and then make another point. I'm going to curve it a little bit right here, add another point, curve a little bit over here, and create another point like this. And so I have this leg. I can even adjust the thickness as needed to make it look a little bit better. I can change the colors to something better. Oh, this is going to look pretty weird. Oh well. Oh. And then, yeah, that's kind of how it works. And so what you'd do, you'd end up creating all these vector drawings for all parts of this guy. So I could vector over here and kind of create a body, and then adjust the layers as needed. So I could put this leg goes on top. I could do this like leg below. And that's kind of how this works. You kind of just repeat that pattern many times. Oh wow, that doesn't look good. Oh, that's why I need to adjust the paths. It helps if you label these. So like left foreleg, and then like chest. Yeah, you get the idea. Just to make sure you have it look right. And so like the final product, I'll just turn all these on. As you can see, the neck was really long, so I kind of moved it around to make it less long. And you can kind of do that in Illustrator. Just pick the parts you would like, and move it around as you see fit. So like, that looks really odd. But there's a lot of work involved in trying to get things to look just right, especially when you're vectoring things. And so you see all these little lines where things happen. You can adjust these curves. So you can see that on the show, they would extrapolate this out to entire scenes where each and every single frame is an adjusted version of this, and moving around all these various pieces and making it look nice. So yeah, that is Adobe Illustrator, a brief rundown. I recommend finding a good tutorial and just watching it and following along with the artist and how he or she does it. Yes, just so you know, cost is free if you're using Inkscape, and so I recommend that. Not free is the Adobe Illustrator Flash. I'll go talk about Adobe Creative Cloud later because that's its own animal. Let's see, but I recommend it if you've learned enough about how to draw and just want to make your drawings look more like the show, because this is what the show is using. It's using this vector program. Or if you hate drawing, but tracing stuff is fun. So you can trace it digitally and end up with these pristine drawings even if you don't have that strong a drawing skill. But it's great. So, yep. So for this, just follow good tutorials online. There's lots of tutorials out there for this. There's one on Inkscape I'm linking to right now, Dasho Halite. Like, he did a very good series. I also watched this other one on Adobe Illustrator that was fantastic. Super long. If you were comfortable sitting down, spending 2 hours watching a video on YouTube and just following along and trying to recreate it step for step, because that is kind of what it takes to do this, is just following along with someone's tutorial and kind of working it from there. And once you have that skill, you can apply it to lots of other different things. Other good resources, the MLP Vector Club. These guys are really strict. It's hard to submit things to them. You have to submit show quality vectors to even be in their club. But they do have lots of resources available, and you can look at that. And as well as the tutorial codex is pretty good. Another thing that I've dabbled in is audio recording. This is a lot of fun. Recording, I've done fanfic readings before, and kind of some of my best stuff is on YouTube is just fanfic reading. So it's a subset of two different skills. Voice acting, which is actually getting a mic and talking in front of it and emoting and being, an actor. And that's interesting. There's all sorts of tutorials for that, and as well as stopping and emulating other voices and trying to talk like them, and also just trying to work on your own voice. And then there's a completely other different skill that's almost unrelated, but it's a package deal if you want to do this all yourself and record the audio and edit the audio later. Editing the audio involves using a digital audio workstation or some kind of software to go in and move aspects of the audio and change them around and mess up and change where you did the flub lines. When I do audio readings, I pretty much do each line about 3 times, because I say it the first time that didn't sound right, and then I say it again, that sounded better, and then I say it again, that worked better that time, and I end up flubbing lines all the time. And so what's needed for that is going back and doing audio editing on that. Let's see, so stuff needed to get started. Software cost, free if you're using Audacity, and then hardware cost. If you're doing fanfic readings, at first, just for his first 20 hours of just dabbling in it, go ahead and just use your laptop microphone. But if you want it to actually sound good, you will someday want to consider buying a microphone. Sorry, some of these hobbies do cost money. That's kind of what happens with certain things. I highly recommend the Blue Yeti microphone. This is the microphone you see right here. You can look at it later on if you'd like just to experiment with it. It is a very good microphone. I recommend doing fanfic readings if you have listened to a lot of audio. If you like listening to podcasts, and you like listening to audiobooks from Audible or anywhere else, and you think it's super cool, or you listen to all these YouTube fanfic reading communities like Scribbler or Narrator Pony or others, and you think those are interesting and want to listen to them. So those are options. And if you like fanfic, because if you're going to be recording fanfic readings, you're going to be reading fanfic out loud. So that kind of comes with the job. Let's see. So there's this 17-part tutorial on YouTube. It's really good. This guy does a fantastic job, but it is kind of long because going to start he explains voice acting principles as well as actually editing audio in Audacity and moving the waveforms around. So it's a little tough. Things to keep in mind, actually, for pretty much this whole panel, lifetime good skill to have is using keyboard shortcuts like Control-C, Control-V, Control-X, being able to manipulate the audio, highlight it, Control X, I can move this over here. Like that is very useful and good for text editing as well. So just learn your keyboard shortcuts. They're handy. Let's see. I did this entire tutorial on how to find and use sound effects for fanfic readings. This can be this entire, like, it is a mess trying to figure out how to add sound effects to fanfic readings sometimes because it's a very time-consuming process. And then you look at the show, they have like 10 people working in the sound effects department for 22 minutes, and you're trying to record like a 3-hour audiobook, and you're like, this may be beyond the scope of what I can do. But sound effects are really cool, and I have several resources in there. Mostly freesound.org is just the place to go and look for royalty-free free sound effects. So that's stuff I've used and what I do. Let's see. So now I'm going to go into video production, which is a giant. It depends, because there's a lot of aspects to this. So let me kind of break it down in different aspects. So you have, actually let me go to so, because it just depends on the software you're going to be using, because this requires a good computer that can handle this kind of stuff, because the higher quality computer you have, the more you can move around these big files. And there's always this arms race where as soon as computers get good enough to handle the current video, well, bam, let's have 4K. And as soon as we'll have computers that can handle 4K real well, we'll have 8K. It's always this busy thing that requires a nice, good computer. So that is a very high barrier to entry. But that is free if you're using Windows Movie Maker, which is really good, or Apple iMovie. Those are both really good programs to look up tutorials on. They're simple, but they get the job done, and you can do a lot of cool things. Dr. Wolf does his entire everything all in iMovie. He's done that for years, and he makes tons of videos every week using that software, and it works great for him. So, which can work good for you. I recommend video production. If you actually absolutely have to get something on YouTube, you're going to need to know a little bit about video and how to create things. Even to put fanfic readings on YouTube, you can't just upload an MP3 file to YouTube. It has to be a .mp4 video file to have it on YouTube. So you're going to want to watch some tutorials and figure that out. Let's see. And then, so kind of what simple things require. So if you want to do a simple PMV where it's just clips from the show set to music, that would be something you'd use Windows Movie Maker, iMovie for. And yeah, it's pretty simple. And Dr. Wolf, like I mentioned, just iMovie. But keep in mind, I'm just talking about analysis videos. If you really want to get into analysis, recognize that you have a lot of different sub-skills to kind of work on. One is writing, because the script of what you're saying is probably the most important part of your video, because that is what you were talking about and what people are interested in. Another aspect of it is drawing, which you can get away with if you commission someone or do something else. You end up with these YouTube channels where lots of people are collaborating on them because it's such a big, massive thing to do to even create a video. But if you're going to do this all and be one person and do this all, you'd have to be good at writing, drawing, or having something on the screen. Audio editing, which I mentioned earlier, having a good microphone for that. And also video editing, just moving the piece of video around. And then, okay, before I go into this next topic of more advanced video, recognize that things get expensive. Like when you're dealing with expensive software like the Adobe Creative Suite, this can cost like $20 a month if you're a student to up to $50 a month, which is super expensive, and I don't really recommend it unless you just have to and you have a lot of disposable income. But this is really good software, though. This is professional level software. It looks really good on a resume. I can say, I know the whole Adobe Creative Suite since I've watched all these tutorials and done all this stuff. Here's a portfolio of some of the stuff I've made that's not Pony, since I don't really share that kind of stuff. I don't really share Pony stuff. But it looks really good, and there's a lot of different software in there. You got Audition for audio editing, Premiere, which is whole movies you see at the movie theater are edited on this software called Adobe Premiere Pro. That is also really well done. Adobe Illustrator, even the show itself, Adobe Flash, that is a product. So it's good, but it's very expensive research stuff. What I find really helpful, for some reason my local library had computers with Adobe Creative Cloud on there. And so I got to learn all this software just at the library. So libraries are awesome.
You can also get a free trial for 30 days if you're trying to learn a new software, decide if you want to buy it.
the free trial is also really good. Let's see, other things to keep in mind. Lynda.com, this is Netflix for online tutorials. They do just classes. I've sat down and watched like 12-hour Adobe Audition tutorials and like been like, whoa. And then it's good, but it's really expensive. It's $20 a month for these video tutorials, but it is really useful. What?
Cheaper than college?
Cheaper than college. So that is there. And they have a lot of skills. If you want to learn business analysis and a bunch of other, they have just a ton of stuff there, learning everything from Python programming to the in-depth processes of 3D animating in Maya. So, but check your local library, because I know a friend of mine, his like library that in his hometown of New Mexico, for some reason gave him access to lynda.com. So just try to figure out what resources you have available to you, and that can really help. They also have a free trial, but I don't know. I think YouTube tutorials can suffice at the beginning. So now that you know some of that more advanced stuff, you kind of get into these other aspects like advanced PMVs, like stuff like the Eclipse, where he's doing all these motion graphics and moving things around. The word to Google there is motion graphics, like motion graphics artists. And so their kind of sub-skills are vectoring, video editing, motion graphics, graphic design, and typography if you're going to do cool text animations. But that's how that's done. It's pretty expensive and exhausting to learn it all, but it's really fun. I took an After Effects course this last a while ago, and it was really entertaining. And it also comes up in some analysis videos. Like I know I love Kim Possible a lot. She does stuff in After Effects, at least from what I can tell. And yeah, this is what video I made about just describing how many words My Little Pony fan fiction are on FinFiction. It's pretty fun. So, yep. And I am running out of time very quickly. So quickly, animation. There's kind of you have to get really good at drawing. Spend hundreds of hours on drawing and like work on it for a while, and then kind of work on animation after that, because they're very next to each other as well. But producing full-on animations, keep in mind the very sub-skills of writing, audio production, video production, and it kind of is a team effort when dealing with animation, as well as sound effects. Don't forget those are useful. And keep in mind that Flash, for some reason, the name has changed to Adobe Animate CC, because Adobe, but yeah. And then there's also the animation like traditional-ish, where you have Toon Boom, which is expensive, but this is so cool, guys. OpenToons, the software that Futurama was used in several, like the Ghibli movies, they use this software to make these animations, they make these movies, and it is now open source and free for anyone to use. So if you wanted, go on YouTube, watch a whole bunch of OpenToons tutorials, because it's free. There's actual good software open and available, which hasn't happened ever before. So be excited, and that is an option. At that point, you're probably going to want to buy a pen tablet and figure that out, but those are just subsections. So in closing, go to Equestria Daily's resource for all these tutorials and a bunch of access to different places. They have a very good codex. And remember, today I pointed you to a lot of different resources. It's up to you to kind of, okay, that was an overview of things I could learn. Now what do I want to learn? And actually go through and say, okay, I'm gonna do 20 hours on this thing. Let's focus on this and select that skill, and then set aside that time and do it. And you can really learn new things, and it can be really enjoyable, and you can have a lot of fun with it. So yeah, and that's the panel. Thank you. Thank you for coming.